Few heartaches cut as deeply as watching an adult child drift away from the values and faith that once bound you together. You pray, you hope, you question, you pray again, and sometimes it doesn't get better. It gets more complicated. You begin to feel unsettled in every way, right down to your heart. Watching the child you once rocked to sleep, sang lullabies to, celebrated first steps with, and spent countless hours cheering at soccer games or dance recitals, walk away from the hopes and dreams you had for their life can be deeply heartbreaking. You stood by them through the awkward teenage years, navigating school struggles, relationship ups and downs, and all the growing pains, still feeling somewhat in control. But then one day, you look up and you ask yourself, what happened to that child that I knew so well? If your heart, friends, is broken right now because of your adult child's choices, you're not alone. You've joined the countless parents around the world who are walking through the same painful emotions. Far too often, parents suffer in silent shame when the best thing they can do is lean into hope. Friends, today is the topic of hope, and that is the hot topic for today. I want you to celebrate with me the fact that we have Jim Burns, the author of this book, When Your Adult Child Strays, Trading Heartache for Hope. I'm so thankful that you came on today, Jim. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be with you again. And wow, when you read that, I need you just to kind of follow me around and read it that way. You read with such emotion. There's so much emotion with even those words. I hear those words all the time because of writing this book and talking about adult children. There's a lot of heartache out there with people who really are so sad that their kids have violated values or strayed from faith and they don't know what to do. And sometimes they make some goofy decisions, but they also need to do that not in isolation. They need to do that around a group of people who, what I always call the circle of support, who can help them through that process. I'm glad we're having this conversation.
I am too. You know, it seems to be an epidemic in our country. I know that sounds bizarre, but it does. Let me tell you, friends, a little bit about Jim. You know, he's been on several times on our show, and I feel honored and blessed to have him. Look up on our podcast or on YouTube, show 110 and 112, Doing Life with Your Adult Children. Keep your mouth shut and the welcome mat out. I tell you, it was one of my favorite books. It was show number 137 and 138, Closer. Now, that's pretty romantic, friends. That's about 52 devotions to draw couples together. I actually did the devotions with my man, and it was amazing. And 249, the show called Finding Joy in the Empty Nest, which makes sense because the kids are moving out. Now we are talking today about this book that is so needed, When Your Adult Child Strays. And Jim Burns is the founder of Homeward. I want you to look that up if you can. Homeward. He speaks to thousands of people around the world each year and has more than, get this, 3 million resources in print in over 20 languages. Jim writes and speaks primarily on the values of Homeward, which are strong marriages, confident parents, empowering kids, and healthy leaders. Some of his most popular books are A Student's Guides to Sexual Integrity. Boy, is that needed. Friends, find that book and read it up for your kids. Doing Life with Your Adult Children, as I had already mentioned, keep your mouth shut and welcome that out. Teaching your children healthy sexuality, that is so needed to hear it from you. And I think what's important too is confident parenting and creating an intimate marriage. Jim and his lovely wife, Kathy, live in Southern California and have 3 grown daughters and 3 sons-in-law and 4 grandchildren. And now he adds to the challenging topics, When Your Adult Child Strays. This is going to be fun today, Jim. I'm so glad that you came on.
Well, great to be with you again. My goodness, as you were saying all those different podcasts, I'd forgotten a couple of those. So you were talking about some of my favorite subjects here.
They are some of my favorite too. And I love the one on laughter. Yeah. So, man, Jim, there are women out there that are sacrificing everything for their children. Since the day they were born, they were agonizing in pain because their adult child has now turned their back on them, strayed, and is rebelling against their upbringing. You, sir, are bringing them hope. Please share with us why you wrote this book and what they can find in it when they read it.
Well, I really wanted to talk about hope. You really picked up on it because there's so much heartache when that happens. And the fact is, a lot of people think they're alone because a lot of people won't talk about it. They feel so much shame that they don't want to tell even their friends, oh, my kid believes this, or my kid, is now, kind of ghosting me or whatever it might be. And so they're out there alone, and there is hope. I hear good stories. I hear crummy stories every day, but I hear good stories of people who have, strayed and violated values, and they don't come back looking exactly like they left, but they do come back, and the relationship can be good. And what I want to say is, you're not defined by your kids' choices. And so many moms, especially, are defined by their kids' choices. How are you doing in life? Well, my daughter does this or my son does this, when in fact, that's their choice. And what we've got to do is stay in the story, keep close to the relationship. And actually, sometimes we're just going to have to agree to disagree. You can have a relationship and you can have a good one and agree to disagree. And remember, it's not a sprint. It's a long marathon. So you talked about some things like empty nest and whatnot. We actually are in the empty nest for many people now longer than we had those kids for those 2 decades in the house. So we've got to figure out how to go about doing our life, loving our kids for who they are, and help them understand that, we're not going to interfere in everything that they do, and we're not going to be defined by that. It's a key issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Right off in the book. And you already mentioned that. You talked about stay in the story. What does that mean to you?
Well, stay in the story means it's a messy story. And I actually say God is okay with messes, but sometimes it's a messy story. But, there are parents who walk away in their own anger or in their own hurt, or they try to preach at their kids or lecture at their kids, and that doesn't work. So what we need to do is lead with love, practice kindness. You can stay in the story by doing that and not agree with all of their decisions, and them not agree with all of your decisions. So stay in the story means stick in it. It's not done. I tell a story about a guy named Eric in the story, and I'm close to this family. His dad is a pastor, and he basically one day said to his parents, I'm distancing myself from you because you're you guys have these views and I don't have these views anymore. And so I just need time. And Eric didn't make good decisions. I'm not saying everybody that distance, doesn't make, some of them make okay decisions, but not the decisions you want maybe. But with this one, he went from woman to woman, and he went from some drugs and whatnot. 15 years later, he's at the back of the church. Dad's a pastor, and the mom's sitting in the usual place, and he's kind of where a bride would be as they sing worship songs. And when the songs were over and they were greeting people, he walked up, came and sat next to his mom, took her hand and said, "Mom, I'm back." And the mom said she started to cry. She cried through the entire service. She said she
I would guess so.
For 3 days. And finally, even Eric, and I love this about Eric, he kind of calmed in the middle of the sermon. She's still crying. And Eric goes, "Mom, you got to get a hold of yourself here." I loved, still the son, right? He didn't come back, wearing all the bumper stickers, having all the bumper stickers or, whatnot. But he came back to his point of faith. And what he was looking for was community. You know what? He never stayed at their church because that church was going to be different than what they were looking for. But he came back to faith. He came back to his senses with some of the other kind of things that he was going through. And, they have a really good relationship now. Is it a perfect relationship? No. But what I'm saying is they stayed in the story. They stayed through some of the mess. When he said, "Let's be distanced," they said, "Okay, well, but we want a relationship. Can we, the next 3 months, could we get in touch with you?" Because he was kind of pulling an estrangement thing, which a lot of adult kids do these days. And he said, "Yeah, you can check in with me in 3 months." And it didn't work very well, but they kept doing these things. They never lectured. They never preached. Took 15 years. Now, again, I hope that's not people's story because I hope it's shorter. But what a cool thing that the parents were willing to stay in it for that long. And they had ups and downs with their son. So they had times where there was more connection. There were times when there were less connection, kind of depended sometimes on the woman that he was with at the time. So, I that's part of the hope of just staying in the story. But you can't do it just by gritting it out. There's actually some things you have to do, and that's what we talk about in the book, the hope, what you can do to stay in that story.
Well, and there is hope. 15 years, I could hear a lot of women going, oh, come on, 15
There's hope.
years,
Yeah.
because to them, every day is a suffering and
Yes.
every day
Yeah.
hurts for them. Now, I love that you shared that, staying in the story, communicating with them every couple months. It's a little awkward at first, but at least you kept
Yeah.
in the story. And I
Yeah.
appreciate that term. It's a good one. I have asked a couple of my friends regarding their adult children,
Mm.
and I would like to share a few of those comments and questions with you. Are you game for that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. One woman's child, adult child, is an addict. And there's a lot of anger involved as well. He's also living a gay lifestyle.
Mm.
And this woman, um, the mom, is being the adult in the room, keeping her cool, listening, being loving, being prayerful, walking alongside her son without judgment. But he is being narcissistic, rude, and disrespectful.
Mm.
How should she respond if she's taken the high road?
Well, first of all, she is taking the high road, so I'm going to give her the star of the day. So she's the homeward where I work, the homeward star of the day,
Mm-hmm.
because honestly, she stayed in it. She's being the adult in the room. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that the results are automatic. Now, there's a little nuance here with this one. He's an addict. And one of the things I
Yeah.
say in the book where I talk about mental health and addiction and things like that is it's very hard to change the relationship if they're still addicted. And so
Mm-hmm.
she's going to have to, she's going to honestly have to, if he's addicted to drugs, narcotics, she may have to go to, a group for that. If he's an alcoholic, maybe Al-Anon, whatever it might be. But she's going to have to learn how to deal with that because most of the time, he can't get away from his issues if he's still addicted. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a biggie because people will say, well, I don't understand where I'm being nice to him and I'm being kind and I don't understand why they don't want to spend time. Well, part of it, he is an addict. I grew up in a
Mm-hmm.
home with my dad as an alcoholic and we have a great story that at 68, he got sober. So, he lost a lot of time, but how beautiful from 68 to 89, he was sober. Not perfect, but sober. And, he changed. He was able then
Mm-hmm.
to communicate better. He was able to do intimacy. But as an addict, he wasn't able to do that. He didn't have the capacity because the way he coped with stress was with the addiction. So I'm not saying that, you only work on the addiction, but what I am saying is make sure that in her way of dealing with him, she's dealing with him as an addict. That's a biggie. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that, you can't then overcompensate. So, sometimes you have to show tough love. Tough love means that you can show empathy, you can show love, and you can show care, but you have to allow the consequences of their poor choices to take place. That's a key. That tough love isn't being angry at your kid or, staying away from them, ghosting them or whatever. What it is no, allow the consequences. Honey, I'm so sorry that you lost your car because, you weren't paying the payments. Well, they weren't paying the payments because as an addict, they'd lost their job and a bunch of other things.
Mm-hmm.
But you can still show love, but at the same time, they've got to feel the pain. But you can't be a one-topic parent. And in doing that with her, she's going to have to, back to staying in the story, she's going to have to stay in the story. Now, she's not going to be able to do it alone. That's why she needs what we call in the book a circle of support. So she's going to need people around her who can help her lift, her weary arms and heart and mind to help that. And you know what? Years ago, I wrote a book called Drug Proof Your Kids. It became the DARE program for the country of Australia. I see a lot of hope in that. I see a lot of heartache, but I do see people that get through that process. So the way to help him get through the process is literally not to take care of him or to overcompensate. In the book, I talk a lot about codependency, and she can't be codependent. So sounds like she's kind of doing it right. She's showing up, she's being with him, but she's not being so codependent that she's actually enhancing the addiction. So there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I gotcha. Yeah, and she's doing a lot of those things, counseling as well. So,
Yeah, good.
all of that. And you talked at length in your book about counseling and
Yeah,
how it benefits and the
yeah,
circle of people to support you and
yeah,
come
right.
alongside you and not to be isolated. I
Yeah.
thought the book was excellent. You guys, you really need to pick it up, especially if you're having any struggles with an adult child. The advice in it is wonderful. So I spoke to another woman and she tries not to, but she still compares her life as she watches other families that love spending time with their adult children. And their adult children love spending time with them, and they bring over their grandchildren on a regular basis. And they're laughing and having a wonderful time and having Sunday dinner. And she asks, why not me, Shug? Why not me?
Right.
Why can't I have that? What happened?
Yeah.
Now, I know that you've talked about the heartache that you've heard, but have you found that this is a natural
Oh,
reaction
sure.
from someone
No, it's natural.
that's child has turned away
Sure.
and they're questioning
No,
themselves?
totally natural. I was talking with a woman this week, and she was asking. My wife had had a health scare, and my daughters have been amazing. And I think, well, I came from a family with all boys. We would have been horrible to my mom. Not bad, just wouldn't have been there for her. You know, my girls are
Yeah.
like, Dad, get it out of the way. We're gonna, cut mom's. Not cut. I started to say cut mom's nails. Is that the worst thing to say? We're going to do kind of a mani-pedi,
Yeah.
us instead of taking her to the place because, she's in the hospital or whatever. They were amazing. And she said, I actually feel jealous. Well, I loved her. I said, I understand. That's a hard thing to do, to play that comparison game.
Yeah.
But you can't play the comparison game because you don't know what happens in the shadow of a closed door. So you don't know, maybe
Yes.
not as good. But you can't play that game. You play that game and you spiral like crazy. So and you got questions for God. Fantastic. He's okay. Like I said, he's okay with messes. He's okay with questions. So, there's just, every family is different. I call it personally tailored parenting, or personally tailored discipleship in parenting. And so you play that comparison game, you're always going to lose. Our Christmas card never looks as good as everybody else's Christmas card because they are all put together, and, somebody was looking the wrong way on our deal and somebody else was, had their zipper down. I hope that's not the truth. I hope if it would be, it would have been me. But, something is going to go crazy in ours. And if we play that game, we're like, what is wrong with us? I mean, there's always somebody who's going to be, appears to be happier, to be richer, to be healthier, to be better in relationship with their kids. But guys like me, people like you, we hear also the inside where we go, oh, that family's not as good. And you can't say it to anybody. But you go, oh no, they're going through all kinds of stuff. That marriage is on the brink. And I know it looks good on paper and on social media, but it's not there. So that's where she needs to make sure that she is willing to talk like she's talking. Again, man, your people are healthy, because we just have to bring that out. Let it out. Put it out there. Realize you're not alone, and that God understands and that God cares. And also that there are other people who on behalf of God come alongside you and say, I know that doesn't seem fair.
Yeah.
Life's not
Yeah.
fair. What did we say
And
to
I
our
like,
11-year-olds? We said, they'd go, life, that's not fair. Well, you know what, buddy? Life's not fair. So
yeah.
that's what we have to learn as adults too. It's a hard
Yeah.
lesson.
And I liked what you said. If you do that, you start to go down that spiral
Yeah.
into that sinkhole, and you got to stop that. And I do believe the only way we can do this is in the power of Jesus Christ. And you talked
Yeah.
about God in this.
Yeah.
And God is with you in this, my friends. But so is the enemy. And I want to take a minute to talk about that. We know the enemy is alive and well. The Bible talks about it. And I just want to know, what advice do you have for our friends where they feel that the enemy, the darkness, is in the middle of this relationship and the heartache that they're feeling?
Yeah. Well, I think they're probably right in a lot of situations, and that's where they do need to pray, and they need to pray with others to break some of those strongholds. God is in control. He is our Heavenly Father. He is more powerful than the enemy. And we can get so focused sometimes on just the negative of the enemy that we forget that our God is a very powerful God. And
Yes.
we had a thing on our refrigerator when one of our daughters was going through a real tough time in college. Just kind of went, crashed a little bit. And we had a beautiful song about breakthrough. Now, she never knew that it was about her, but we had the, kind of the words to a song on the refrigerator. And I would look at that thing every day, and I would pray for a breakthrough. Well, guess what? Our pastor always said, God is never too early and he's never too late. Sometimes I think he's too late, but I'm not God. So the breakthrough for us happened after college, after some things, but we focused on that, and we said, we're going to assume that there's going to be a breakthrough one day. It's not exactly how I would have done the breakthrough, but I'm not God. See? So it's a relinquishment of our of our will to God's will. I mean, Jesus, I just read this because I go through the 1 year Bible and I just happen to have this in the 1 year Bible. Jesus is at the end of his life and he says, God, you could take this away from me, but not my will, your will. And then, he
Yes.
said it 3 times. This is Jesus saying this. This isn't you and me. He's 3 times. He said, just in case you didn't hear me, God, you could take this away from me, but not my will, your will. Well, that's what we say to God sometimes. We just have to say, I don't understand. And at the same time, I'm going to relinquish, you love them more than I do. I'm going to relinquish them to you. Now help me have the strength and the power to live what I believe out. But that doesn't mean he's going to take away our heartbreak sometime or our
Yes.
pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the harder things for us as Christians, because we've seen people. I have a good friend who was an alcoholic. She's a very good speaker and a tremendous. She works in Washington, D.C. and does amazing things. But she has a testimony that she prayed to God and that she overcame alcoholism. And it's a beautiful, in one day. It's a beautiful story. I always cringe a little bit. I tell her, she's my good friend, because that's what every addict does. They pray that God would take it away, and it doesn't happen in that same manner. So we have to be careful when we play the comparison game with somebody else who their kids did turn quicker than our kids turned, or their kids, moved back into the church quicker. Now they're, worship leaders, and our kid is like still hating the church. We just have to be careful that we don't play that comparison game all the time, or we're always going to lose.
Yeah. And scripture talks about that quite a bit. So your battle is not against flesh and blood. That's the first one we have to think of, and know that prayer is powerful and can move mountains. Book of James talks about, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter trials of many kinds. Why? Basically, I'm going to summarize it in the ADHD version, is because you will be found mature and complete, not lacking in anything.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the best verses for me, because it talks about wisdom right after that.
Yeah.
If you are lacking wisdom, now friends, when you're in the middle of this junk, you are lacking wisdom because you just want to hang on to those kids, bring them back. You love them so much. But God tells us, if you are lacking wisdom, ask, and it will be given to you without finding fault. And so my husband and I, after studying this word a while back, we've made a list of what we need wisdom on. And I encourage you, friends, to do the same thing. What do you want God's wisdom on? And he will give it to you without finding fault.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how he answers those prayers. But you're exactly right. Comparison kills, and it's not a good thing. And I think it's more important to stay focused on the Lord and what you're learning through this, and indeed how you can be praying for your child.
You're right. And somebody just asked me on a personal level about that. And I said, I want to lean into God. And what I'm learning is God is not taking away my circumstance. My circumstance may not change, but my attitude and my relationships can change. And in doing that it goes back to that, kind of relinquishing. So yeah, every circumstance is not going to change, even when we pray. We're not the Lord. He's the Lord. And so sometimes what we have to do is we just have to get strong enough to be able to go, okay, you're giving me the strength and the power to get through whatever I'm going through. And you look back up 5 years from now, 5 weeks from now, 5 hours from now, and you go, well, things have changed a little bit. But that's where we have to be very patient. And those are not easy issues for anybody who has a child who's straying from their values and their faith.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, think about it this way, friends. How can you be praying for your child? Hurting people hurt people is really what happens.
Yeah.
And so how can you be praying for your child in the hurt that they're living in right now that you don't know about? And God knows, though, and that healing can happen. And I have seen the power of prayer in healing in all different ways, physical, spiritual. You can pray here and across the world, impacts are happening. So I really encourage you to continue to pray and give it to God and trust. It's hard to do. Share, cry, talk to God. But as long as you're talking to God, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, you are not alone in this. And sometimes you feel so alone.
You're not. I looked up some statistics on this. I found it very interesting, just the whole topic, because it wasn't heard of when we were younger. And now it seems to almost be, commonplace or a thing to do. And there are many reasons for estrangement, and a few you mentioned in your book, which are sexuality and gender, faith, politics, addiction. I saw on one morning show, get this, a national morning show regarding politics, that this celebrity was encouraging viewers that if your family members didn't vote the same as you,
Right.
disown them. And I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, get her off the air. I don't even know how you could do that. How can adult children just toss aside a mother or a father or family like that? Family is family, and politics come and go. And it seems like an epidemic, Jim. A study shows from parents.com that 26% of the children who are divorcing their parents, it's 20%, 26% in the nation. Do you see this increase in this crazy behavior?
Well, it has increased greatly, and especially this generation, Gen Z, millennials have gone more that way. And sometimes, like you say, they'll even get it from a counselor. 26, 27%. So that's it's 1 out of 4. The way I look at it, I'm in a room when I'm talking about estrangement. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's remarkable when you start thinking about it. And estrangement is fascinating because it's oftentimes started by if we're talking about adult children, because the number one reason for estrangement is divorce and it's dad. There's a dad is estranged. Number 2 is then adult children for all the reasons you said. So what we have to be very careful is to not further the estrangement by telling them how right we are and how wrong they are, because that's exactly not the way to work through an estrangement. Tina Gilbertson, who's kind of the authority on this whole thing, and I quote her in the book in that chapter on estrangement, she says, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about mending the fences. So this is where we as parents, we want to tell them how wrong they are. I get it. But what we really have to do is mend the fence. And sometimes that means on our part, even though maybe you're 80% right and they're 20% right, whatever. This is where you have to, embrace, hey, I'm sorry you feel this way. I want our relationship to be, to be better, and keep your mouth shut in terms of all the things you could say about their different views or whatever. But you're going to have to embrace a relationship with a different view. They leave us, and then what they think we're doing is we're going to snub them. And what we really have to do is go, you know what? We're going to live with different views, but we love each other. We are family. Remember that song?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's so hard for us to do, but the goal here is to establish and reestablish connection, and change the tone of the relationship, because they've set the tone, and their tone is, we're done. We're cutting it off. What we've got to do is change the tone, the atmosphere, and really, we acknowledge the estrangement, but when it's estrangement, we lead with love, we be kind. But you know what? We have to also say, okay, we're going to do this on your terms. So if you don't want a relationship right now, would you mind if I checked back in? Like, I mean, I know somebody who still gives presents to the grandkids and all this kind of stuff going on, but they don't want them, to see the grandkids because of their faith. And they said, but can we still do? So they lavish them with, and I'm not saying expensive gifts, but they're not doing the give your kids, your grandkids, socks and underwear. They're giving them, fun. One of them loves Disney, so they do Disney things, all that. We have to be very careful how to do it, but we can't. You mentioned earlier about counsel. I think when there's an estrangement going on, the Bible's very clear. Where there is no counsel, the people fall. In the multitude of counselors, there is safety. I think we need counsel, because a counselor who knows what they're talking about with estrangement can help you tiptoe back into the relationship, as opposed to, kind of, you want to just, jump into it. But you got to be respectful in the midst of thinking, this is the dumbest thing and craziest thing I've ever heard. And I get it. Really.
I mean, I was just thinking that in my head. I'm thinking about my friends and other women that are listening, and they're going, really? Gifts? I am so ticked at that kid for his behavior. Right. And, but I hear what you're saying. Stay in the story. It's very difficult for women who have been blocked out, where there is no communication, no talking. Ghosting, I think, is the term that you used in your book.
Yeah.
But since we're on the topic, what are some do's? I'm going to wrap it up with this, friends, because you got to get this book. What are the do's and don'ts you would recommend in this crazy estrangement.
Yeah. Well, I think when there is estrangement, I acknowledge that there's an estrangement and acknowledge that you're ticked and acknowledge that you're hurt and all that. But they're not your therapist. They're not your
Mm-hmm.
pastor. They're not your good friends. So you've got to have those conversations with somebody else. And when you have those conversations, it doesn't take away the pain. It doesn't take away the issue. But what it does is it helps you understand that others are kind of there for you. So you got to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you move toward reconciliation. You start with reconciliation and prayer. I mean, this book is a very spiritual book for me, because I'm not
It
just saying,
is.
okay, pray and God's going to make it all better. What I am
Yeah.
saying is pray and God's in control and you're going to have to relinquish that. Yeah, I do say that. But, move toward whatever it takes to be reconciled and be respectful, even though you don't agree with them. That's a do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really hard do, especially
It
when you go,
is.
wait, you're blowing it, or I know somebody who is in this exact situation, and I use the word forfeiting spiritual purpose. And they go, well, my daughter's forfeiting her spiritual purpose. And so I tell her
Mm-hmm.
every day that she's forfeiting her spiritual purpose. Well, you don't want to tell her every day because she's heard you. Does she know
Yeah.
what you believe? Does she know how you feel? Yeah. Then you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to back it off a bit. But
Yeah.
you can't tell them things like, in the book I talk about a lady who just goes, look, I wiped your nose. We've given you money, and you're treating us now by being estranged from us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we're not perfect, but it wasn't that bad. I get it. Probably all that is true. That's the thing. But it's not true in their mind and they don't understand. So, when you're talking with them, I don't think you're the one to focus on the issues. Or like I said to somebody just recently, so they got a coffee meeting. Yay, because it had not been good. They got a coffee meeting. And I
That's a
said,
big deal.
is it
Mm-hmm.
possible for you to not say a word to them in terms of but you, could you just say, help me understand some of the things you're going through. And I really am open to
Mm-hmm.
this and I really want to hear it. And she said it was amazing because she started to cry and she said, I'm so sorry you feel that way.
Mm.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And she goes, I was being punched in the gut, Jim. I just wanted to say, but do you realize that you're the cause of this pain? But instead, she just said, I'm sure there's another time when we could have dialogue, but right now I'm just so happy that you shared this. Thank you. You know what the daughter did? She hugged her and said,
Oh.
thank you, Mom, for listening. Well,
Mm-hmm.
hey, the daughter was wrong on some of this. I mean, I don't even know the situation, and it couldn't have been that bad. But
Mm-hmm.
with what the daughter was saying, but she handled it right. But that means you're bringing up the issues and simply I've said it over and over again, but we just can't be defensive with this. And
Yeah.
it goes the opposite of any communication. It goes the opposite. I'm speaking next week on marriage, and I talk about how defensiveness is not a good trait for conflict. Well, we do it. Okay. Well, we do
Mm-hmm.
that with our
Mm-hmm.
kids, and we can't be defensive. We just let them vent their frustration, let them vent their blame. I'm not saying you walk on it or you agree with it. I'm just saying
Mm-hmm.
allow that, because that puts them in disequilibrium. Like, wow, my mom's listening to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
I love that question that you advised the
Yeah.
gal on with the coffee to keep
Yeah.
an open conversation, and then she sat back and listened.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Right. Right. There's
Mm-hmm.
another conversation to be had.
Mm-hmm.
It's ongoing.
Yeah, but that's such a good start, and to finally
Yeah.
be able to sit down and have coffee. And those
Right.
poor moms that are getting blocked out where they can't even ask if you can have coffee.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
just the power of prayer, my friends. Well, I have to let you go. You are wonderful. I also enjoyed the part where you said, I'm sorry is a powerful diffuser of
Yeah.
intense feelings. And I
Yeah.
think that if, like you said in the book, if you find something to apologize for, you've already lowered that temperature,
Yeah.
which I think is just powerful. I just have to thank you so much, Jim. This is going to help so many women and families across not only the nation, but the world as well, on bringing peace and bringing God into it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just makes perfect sense. It really does. And I thank you for bringing that hope to all of my friends.
Yeah. My pleasure anytime. Love being with you. Thank you for what you do.
Yeah, God bless you. And friends, if you are living through this and you don't have Jesus in your life, take a minute right now, because only this is possible. This peace and this love is possible through Jesus. You know, we have a lot of hatred, we have a lot of anger, and things are going on inside of us, and that is not from the Lord. And so if you invite him into your heart, invite Jesus into your life, you will be on the greatest joy ride ever. Let me know if you did that at himforher.org, and we have a special gift for you. And thank you again, Jim, for coming on. And God bless all of you women who are struggling through this topic. You know I love you. Shug Bury, over and out.